And now continues with this was for like active smokers from electronic device, and now our host is going to speak about the environment effects, or it should be the equivalent to passive smoker effects in electronic cigarettes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry. No, the only problem is that we have to go out of the auditorium at 5 minutes before the hour announced, because there will be another session during our lunch out of the. So this is the only way. But I believe we will have enough time to explain and to have some questions and so on. So thank you very much to the organizers of the symposium to invite me to. Okay. Well, I was not sure whether I had to speak, but some colleagues asked me to explain some of our recent results on second-hand exposure to the emissions, to the vapor of e-cigarettes. So the question that the journalists, the media, that lay people ask is there a passive exposure to the emissions, to the vapor of electronic cigarettes? This is the question. And well, from what we know, this is a nice picture from the German report that Martina is laughing now. Well, it's clear that the liquids have been analyzed, and we are able to find different, even carcinogens like formaldehyde or acetaldehyde in the liquids. Of course, they are in less. Whoa, this doesn't work. In less quantity than in conventional cigarettes in the right column, in the columns in the right. But there are some substances in the liquids that are later vaporized. I like this table taken from a recent report from the group of Stanton Glantz in California, because it shows the toxicants in e-cigarettes and also in cigarettes, in the smoke of cigarettes and in the vapor of electronic cigarettes. But more than the levels that in the case of e-cigarettes are low, it's curious to see that there are some rows with figures in the column of the e-cigarettes, but not in the column of traditional cigarettes. This means that we are searching for things that we know using the traditional approach to search the things we know there were or there are in the conventional cigarettes. But we have to search also for other things already present in the vapor from electronic cigarettes, such as the case of cadmium, nickel, or xylene. So what I'm going to do, rather than present few of the data available in the literature, I want to show you some results from our group. Part of these results are in review in a scientific journal, and the other results are still under elaboration, and well, we are presenting confident that we are not that we are doing the right thing here. So I will be presenting two studies. The first one comparing the exposures at homes of of smokers of e-cigarettes and of smokers of traditional cigarettes. We have measured there the nicotine and also particulate matter, and also we have assessed the levels of nicotine in the non-exposed people living in those homes. So the objectives is just this, to characterize the passive exposure to these emissions of e-cigarettes among non-smokers who live with e-cigarettes users. So we work with 50 volunteers, half of them living with conventional cigarette smokers, 5 living with e-cigarettes smokers, and 24 living in completely smoke-free homes, and with people not exposed to conventional cigarettes at work or in other settings. What we did is to measure environmental markers of exposure in air. First, we used nicotine in air, airborne nicotine, with this sampling method and gas chromatography to detect the quantity of nicotine and then derive the concentration in the air, taking into account the size of the room where the monitor was installed during 7 days. And we also assessed the presence of particulate matter. These are the particles that form the air, of less than 2.5 micrometers in the air. This is an approach to the presence of smoking, of smoke, or in fact these particles are not only generated by burning tobacco, but also they are generated by the heating of the products within the electronic cigarette. And as you may see in the figure, there is a very, very good correlation between these particles in air and the concentration of nicotine in air. And in many studies of secondhand smoke, traditional smoke from traditional cigarettes, these machines and these methods have been used to characterize secondhand smoking exposure. We also assessed the concentration of cotinine in the saliva and in the urine of the non-smokers living with the e-cigarette users. We took a sample of saliva and some urine and we analyzed them to obtain this metabolite of nicotine. Nicotine is inhaled and then it is metabolized very quick to cotinine, which is a stable molecule that can be measured and informs about the exposure, the passive exposure to nicotine. So the results, as you may see, the big column reflects the high exposure of non-smokers to nicotine living in homes where there are cigarette smokers, traditional cigarette smokers. But the other two columns show us the concentrations of nicotine among people exposed to e-cigarettes. And this concentration, although not very high, is 10-fold that measured in people who lives in completely smoke-free homes. These figures show the concentrations of particles. The red line, the top red line, showed the concentrations in homes where smoking traditional cigarettes is allowed. And the lines around the 10 micrograms per meter cubic shows the concentrations in homes where there were e-cigarettes or there were smoke-free. As the figure is not very good, we may amplify it. And what you may see here, considering the stars, the asterisks are the puffs that the e-cigarette smoker did during the measurement time. And the blue line, which like a mountain and goes up and down, is the concentrations of particles in those homes, in the home with the smoker of the e-cigarette. These levels are above 10 micrograms per meter cubic. That is the minimum level of safety as said by WHO. So, in addition to this, we measure cotinine in saliva and urine, and what we may see is that both biomarkers were increased both among people exposed to e-cigarettes, as marked in the table, and also to those people exposed to conventional cigarettes, with few differences. Although the environmental markers indicated a huge concentration in those homes with traditional smokers, the quantity inhaled and metabolized by passive smokers, both to e-cigarettes or traditional cigarette smoke, was similar. In conclusion, We believe that these environmental markers objectively show the presence of small particulate matter less than 2.5 and less than 1 micrometer, and also nicotine in the homes of e-cigarette users, and also that the personal biomarkers indicate that non-smokers living with e-cigarette smokers are exposed to the exhaled vapor from the e-cigarettes and incorporate and metabolize nicotine, as we may measure then the cotinine in their saliva and their urine. The other study is not an observational study, but we tried to make it under controlled conditions. And the question was, well, perhaps in small spaces, not, well, the homes are small spaces, depending, but what about cars that can be ventilated or cannot be ventilated? And we made different experiments to assess whether particulate matter and nicotine was present in, from the emissions of electronic cigarettes. So we designed 3 experimental situations, and we did 5, and we repeated the experiment in 5 occasions. The control, there was a control measurement. There was another situation, the experiment B, with measurements and consumption of e-cigarettes, and we also did the same experiment with smoking of tobacco product, a cigarette, traditional cigarette. We were in a car during 90 minutes, an hour and a half. We made a control measurement of 15 minutes, then we drive the car, and during 30 minutes there was the use of the e-cigarette or the traditional cigarette in movement with the windows partly open. Then we make a washout, we open completely all the windows and drive for 15 minutes, and then we repeated the experiment with a drive of 13 minutes with the car stopped and the windows closed. We did this here at the Institute. We define this perimeter combining areas without traffic and areas by the highway, and trying to control also for the pollution. So we have these 2 experiments. This is the e-cigarette user, a friend of us, smoking his electronic cigarette in the car. And we also have a smoker who, by the way, is quitting. She started to quit 1 week ago, but helped us with these cigarettes during the 5 experiments. So we measured particles and we measured nicotine in the environment before the experiments in the car. We installed these machines in the rear seat to reproduce what a person in the rear seat would be inhaling with, well, there are several devices for the particles and also the devices to actively collect the nicotine. And, whoops, we have these results. This is a sample, this is an experiment with electronic cigarettes. As you may see, in phase 1, these are particles. There are no particles. In phase 2, when the e-cigarette is smoked while driving and with the windows open, there are some concentrations, not extremely high, but there are, well, till 25, etc. Then we have the washout period, and in phase 4, with the car stop, the consumption of 1 cigarette, equivalent in doses in nicotine, I haven't said it, to 2 conventional cigarettes. Here you may see how the particles increase with the puffs of the e-cigarette that are shown in the in the arrows in the top of the figure. Each arrow indicates a path of the smoker to his e-cigarette. Perhaps it's better to see it in more detail. This is the phase 2 of the same experiment, enlarged. And here, I believe it's possible to see how the particle concentration increases with each of the puffs, and how they decay rapidly, or how they maintain and even arrive to high concentrations at the end of the figure when several puffs are made together. Similarly, these are the concentrations with the car stop, and we may see how the continuous puffs make the concentration increase, while there are some periods without puffs and very, very low concentrations. This is the case of the conventional cigarettes. It's a topic that has been investigated before, but with the windows semi-open and driving the car, there are some concentrations. This is a tricky figure because you have to try, I don't know if it is possible, to see the axis. These small points on the top of the pink part of the figure are large amounts of concentrations. The problem is that the top of the figure are not large amounts, but extremely large amounts of particles. Better to see here. This, now I believe that you may see the axis better, and in the case of smoking a cigarette, a traditional cigarette, the concentrations of particles arrive to 300 micrograms per meter cubic. This is something similar to what was measured in bars and restaurants when it was not banned to smoke inside them. Okay, and here what I'm presenting, yes, is the median concentrations. The median concentrations when the car was stopped. As you may see, both PM1, smaller particles, or PM2.5, have concentrations 3 times and 4 times higher than the medians in the control experiments. And of course, the concentrations when traditional cigarettes were consumed are extremely high. In the last row, you may see the concentration of nicotine. As you may see, it's almost indetectable in the control situation, and we obtain a median of 1 microgram in the electronic cigarette experiment. This means a 10-fold increase than in a normal situation without the use of an electronic cigarette. Thus, we may conclude that the environmental markers objectively show again that the emissions to the environment are present, and we have been able to detect PMs, particulate matter, of less than 2.5 and less of 1 micrometer, and also nicotine, and that in a small closed space such a car, it was my car, the use of a cigarette with the equivalent to 2 traditional cigarettes during, I believe, short time of period similar to a usual work trip or going to school trip with the kids, produces particulate matter above the WHO limits. So this is our answer up to date about to the question we presented at the starting of this presentation. Exhaled vapor from electronic cigarettes pollutes the air, as also advanced by Martina, with these fine particles that we know have an inflammatory effect on vessels, on the airway, and so on, and promote different diseases like heart attacks. And also there is nicotine. so that people exposed to exhaled vapor from e-cigarettes incorporate and metabolize nicotine, and supposedly, or some studies also indicate this, if they are inhaling the particles, the nicotine, as we have measured, they are also inhaling other toxicants and carcinogens. So thank you very much. I want to agree the collaboration. There is a lot of people working on this, people who is here in the room also helping with the organization of the symposium. Thank you very much. Tendríamos que acabar.
Well, thank you very much, Esteve, for your very interesting communication about the environment effects from the electronic cigarettes. I see the times came back. You are experimenting with yourself and your family like the first times of the vaccines, no? Okay. Well, now it's time for questions. We have the first.
Thank you. This is Elif Dagli from Turkey, Istanbul. I've got one question for each. The one for Esteve to start with. In the homes, the study you have carried out in the homes, you found that the particles were not so high, but the cotinine levels were comparable with the classic cigarettes. Yes. Could it be that the nicotine is probably dispersed in a gas form rather than particle form? Are we measuring something else than classical cigarettes? And the question to Martina, you have finally showed the European Union Product Directive. Apparently EU had decided to regulate this product as a tobacco product and is getting some rules for it. But it was too late for Europe to do otherwise because it was widely sold around Europe. But there are countries close to Europe, like mine, where it is still not sold widely. And could it be a possibility to regulate it like a drug or ban it totally?
Martina, you? And yes,
okay.
You, please.
Oh, Elif, this is a very delicate question, I can tell you. The process of the negotiations of the Tobacco Product Directive was running during the last year. Between, the European Commission made a proposal, and the proposal was said that e-cigarettes should be regulated as pharmaceutical products, and then they under the safety of the pharmaceutical products. However, the parliamentarians in the European Parliament, they were really extremely influenced by strong e-cigarette lobbyists, and they decided to open the market as a general lifestyle product, but to use the regulatory framework of tobacco for nicotine-containing products. And finally, also the member states, they agreed to this compromise, but there is no regulation for the non-nicotine products. So that also no regulation regarding advertising or the flavors or the form or whatever. And this is the huge dilemma. I think after 1 year intensive discussion, mainly in Brussels or in Strasbourg, but also in the member states, there will be no change in EU to cut down the Tobacco Product Directive, because it was hard enough to establish such a regulation. But there are some articles in this directive that allows member states to go beyond. For example, on the question of banning advertising, or also banning flavors, and to decide maybe only to allow as flavor tobacco flavors, for example. Or also, if 3 member states decide, for example, to ban all inhalation products, they could do it when they have reasonable points of interest for public health. When 3 countries do it, they could go forward. For example, I know that Finland and other countries, they are not at all delighted about the Tobacco Product Directive. And maybe there will be an initiative of the Nordic countries, maybe, of the Scandinavian countries. We don't know. But it's open.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for the question. And you are right. The method we use captures vapor phase molecules of nicotine. And we analyze this. And this is the nicotine that is mostly inhaled by the non-smoker. It is true that PMs, particulate matter, also contains particles of nicotine. Colleagues of us at the Technical University here in Barcelona, the Technical University of Catalonia, have measured the filters for environmental pollution, and they have found in the filters in the city nicotine. They have analyzed the remaining the particles attached to the filter in a passive way, and they have analyzed them and have found also nicotine, but not the same nicotine as we are measuring, because our method captures the vapor phase nicotine. So perhaps this is one of the explanations, and also perhaps how we metabolize the nicotine inhaled.
Well, next question.
I am Barbara Holm Ivarsson from Professionals Against Tobacco in Sweden. First, a question for you, Martina. You said there's a blooming market for e-shisha without nicotine. I was so surprised to hear that, because in my understanding, water pipes almost always do contain high levels of nicotine.
Yeah, can I answer directly? Yeah, yes, it's indeed the new wave in some of the European countries, and it's just a marketing instrument to say it's e-shisha to go, just to raise up the interest of the young. And it's only the young generation that is taking it.
But is that true, that they often don't contain nicotine?
They say that they have no nicotine. However, we have in the meantime we have measurements that
7
from 10, 7 contain nicotine. Yeah. So you are not sure. So this is a clear question for regulator and for public health controls, of course. Yeah.
And then a question for you, Mr. Fernandez. You said emissions produce particles above WHO limit. And where can these be found, these limits?
Yes, these limits are are established by a commission, but they are put for outdoors, and they are mean levels during 24 hours, or they can be found in the website of several agencies, and also in the WHO website. They are, I don't remember the exact name of guidelines for environmental pollution, etc. If you Google it, and you will find.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Marissa D'Andrade from the University of Stirling. Thank you very much. Two brilliant presentations, and I look forward to adding to them this afternoon. Actually, on the point of CO2 monitors and going in and using these monitors to monitor emissions, we had some anecdotal evidence where people from the NHS in the UK were sometimes talking about people who were smokers who said they'd stopped smoking but using just e-cigarettes. So they were using these monitors to see whether or not they had actually, to check whether they weren't lying about it for incentives. And they started getting, some of these monitors started giving abnormal, what we thought were abnormally high readings for certain things, which really surprised us in the initial days. And your research goes some way to explain where and how. So I think it's a really valuable piece of information. And linked to this, my question is, in Scotland, there's, we've been having lots of debates about whether or not there is enough evidence to include smoke-free legislation, e-cigarettes in smoke-free legislation. And the overwhelming point always made is that, well, we don't have the evidence of harm. We don't have evidence to show, and renormalization is improved, and these are the arguments that policymakers are putting forward. So do you think that your studies provide enough evidence to show that the e-cigarettes should be included in smoke-free legislation?
Thank you very much for this complicated question. Well, being honest, I believe that this study is not enough evidence, but I believe that this is the good answer that any scientist will provide you. We are not confident of our results. Well, we are confident of our results, but they are 5 experiments or they are 1 observational study. You can say public health messages based on 1 case control study or even 5 clinical trials. So I believe this is a small piece to better understand, and that the accumulation of several studies like this, better than this, perhaps worse than this, with some methodological pitfalls or I don't know, will provide enough evidence in the future. Enough evidence to say, yes, we have to legislate, or enough evidence to say, perhaps it's not necessary and to legislate. What we have found is that there is nicotine in the air of these e-cigarette users, and that non-users inhale the nicotine clearly because, well, I haven't explained, but we did a questionnaire with asking for exposure in other settings, different than the homes, at the workplaces, even at transportation, bus stops, well, in front of the buildings, the places where a non-smoker can be exposed to tobacco smoke. And we are sure about that they were not exposed. Nicotine, however, is very, very ubiquitous, is the word. You may find even nicotine in the hair, yes, of nuns living in the top of a mountain. So this is said by our colleagues in the lab. One of the problems is to have controls for nicotine. But we believe the results, and we believe they are a piece in the way to have more information. Thank you.
More questions?
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Juan Rey from University of Granada, and and I wanted to pose both of you a question about, well, I work in a marketing research department at University of Granada. I've been working in tobacco control of marketing activities for the last 6 years, and during this last 6 months we have been doing a qualitative research, basically ethnographic research. So students, university students, had to visit points of sales of e-cigarettes We did also a part of social media, and then we analyzed all the information given at the point of sales, as well as social media, Facebook and Twitter. The thing is that coming from a marketing department, I'm quite amazed to see how easy they advertised, because it was the positioning they wanted to create within the point of sales, with these very aggressive tactics like natural product, something that I think that in both of your presentations make clear that natural product is an apple, but it's not an e-cigarette. Something to help to quit smoking, or free for second hand, and it was in all the point of sales that we visited. It was really consistent, all these messages. My question is, from a policymaker point of view, I mean, if for instance, Procter & Gamble makes a statement about a product and it's not absolutely true, Unilever will be immediately denouncing that it's not absolutely true what they are saying. But when I see this thing, how you deal with the fact that they are not telling completely the truth, but there's nothing to be done, while they position the product in the mind of young consumers, and this will take time after to quit. Yeah, thank you.
I can answer. Luckily, the Tobacco Product Directive gives the direction, or shows the direction. It will be forbidden in the future to advertise with health claims for such products, and this is a good message. I think the product directive is not so bad as some people are meaning, but we have also good articles on it, and they are very important to implement now in our member states. But we can go beyond, of course. Yeah.
Well, nothing to add. In fact, your question had the answer very implicit.
Time for our last question. Somebody?
Mi nombre es Arturo Ribes. Yo quería preguntar a Esther Fernández, en las pruebas que se hicieron en el vehículo, ¿qué graduación de nicotina tenían los líquidos?
Tenían, bueno, lo digo en castellano y se traduce, ¿verdad? For the non-Spanish speaking. Tenían el equivalente a 2 cigarrillos. Previamente eran 2 cigarrillos de una marca determinada, miramos la concentración de nicotina de estos cigarrillos y entonces hicimos la equivalencia. No recuerdo si eran 2,5 gramos de nicotina, no recuerdo exactamente, pero intentamos ajustar para que los experimentos y las concentraciones, lo que detectáramos, fuera comparable, que lo que podemos regular es el líquido de los cigarrillos electrónicos. Lo que hicimos fue ajustar la dosis de nicotina del cigarrillo electrónico al equivalente de los 2 cigarrillos de una determinada marca comercial.
Bien, yo soy vapeador, dejé de fumar con el cigarrillo electrónico y actualmente pues vapeo ocasionalmente a 0 miligramos de nicotina. Supongo que a 0 miligramos de nicotina en un líquido comprobado que no tiene nicotina no se observarán partículas de nicotina.
En el experimento, esto no te lo puedo responder con nuestros datos, porque nosotros utilizamos líquidos con nicotina. Queríamos ver las partículas y la nicotina en el aire. No sé si es arriesgado suponer, pero vaya, seguramente partículas encontraríamos porque se generan con el calentamiento del líquido, y si el líquido está absolutamente libre de nicotina, pues entonces no tendría que haber nicotina en el aire. Atención, también sabemos por análisis de líquidos que hay líquidos que dicen no contener nicotina y que contienen, o que dicen que contienen determinadas concentraciones y tienen más o menos nicotina. Este es uno de los problemas justamente de la falta de regulación y de control de las personas que fabrican y más que distribuyen, que fabrican estos líquidos.
Correcto. ¿Otra pregunta para Martina? Rapidita.
Wait, please wait. Thank you.
The official translators, I will try to.
¿Ya?
Yeah.
La producción de formaldehído, ha añadido usted, que se produce en el cigarrillo electrónico a temperaturas elevadas.
The formaldehyde production occurs at high temperatures within the e-cigarette.
Yeah, the temperature in the e-cigarette is maybe between 200 or 300 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So that you know that the temperature is varies during the inhalation process. So at the beginning it's low temperature, around 80 degrees. However, when the user is starting to very deeply inhale and inhales one puff after the next, then the temperature is going up around 200 or 300, and then you can measure also the carcinogens. You cannot measure the carcinogens at the beginning, but under the normal conditions of using these products, then the carcinogens are coming up more and more.
Realmente la mayoría de los dispositivos que existen en el mercado tienen una potencia de entre 3,2 y 4,1 voltios que no alcanzan esas temperaturas.
Well, he says that most of the devices in the market have a voltage not arriving to those temperatures.
It depends of the product indeed, yeah. So, but as consumer, you cannot be sure, and this is a point of regulation too, to regulate the security of the products for the consumers. This is crucial for them to be sure that you will not have an overheating system and have not an overloading carcinogenic substances.
Muchísimas gracias.
Well, now it's time for finish this very interesting table. And now,
yes, thank you very much. Well, we have an informal lunch, so you may